Hey, everybody, and welcome to Sell Yeah, the 8-Fig podcast segment that features interviews with a wide array of our valued partners and sometimes seller customers to spread the good word about what they're doing to bring value to the e-commerce space and make for a better ecosystem for us all. I'm your host, as always, Sam Bell. I'm also the partnership manager with 8-Fig. So again, I appreciate you tuning in to hear more about our esteemed partners. Before we begin, I just have one request of our listeners. If you're enjoying this podcast and think others might also enjoy this podcast, feel free to leave us a rating and review wherever you listen. This will help others to discover the podcast and hear more about our awesome partners like Katie. So let's get started. We have an awesome chit chat coming up today. Our guest has probably one of the coolest agencies and one of the coolest brands I've ever seen. So please, everyone, welcome Katie Kravit with The Ugly Wolf. Katie, thank you so much for joining. How are you doing?
Hi, Sam. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. I'm really good to hear. I mean, I'm really excited to have you on. And it's going to be an awesome conversation. The Ugly Wolf, again, really cool. And for those who are not yet familiar with Katie, she is an award-winning creative director, strategist, and co-founder of Ugly Wolf, a full-service brand design agency focused on building brands and telling stories that people care about. Throughout her career, she's built, launched, reinvented brands from startups to giants, working with brands like Amazon, Minibar Delivery, Chief, Primary, New School, Snacks, and more. When Katie isn't running her business, she can be found catching sunsets with her 2 rescue pups, Rocky and Ranger, excellent names, by the way, chasing after a teetering 1-year-old, and fixing up a vintage Airstream with her husband. Wow, what a Renaissance girl, Katie. That's that's really awesome, and a very impressive background, which I know everyone's really excited to hear about. So maybe that's a good place to start. Why don't we walk the audience through your background a bit more, like what led you down this path in entrepreneurship and what ultimately inspired you to launch Ugly Wolf?
Yeah. Well, I'll go back to younger Katie. I thought I wanted to be a journalist because that was the most professional, creative job I could think of. I quickly found out I did not want to do that. I wanted to solve people's problems instead of just write about them. But I loved connecting with people and telling stories. So I got into design. I've been in the design industry for about 15 years now. And I started my career working as a designer for editorial like fashion blogs and in-house fashion brands. Realized that wasn't for me. And then I started working at Amazon and working on 10 e-commerce brands in beauty, fashion, or not fashion, beauty, home, pets, kids clothing, kids toys, and specialty foods. So really I called that my grad school of e-commerce when I was working there, because we really got to know the ins and outs of everything e-commerce and standing out with branded curations and things like that. So from there, I became the creative director at an alcohol startup. So went from a big corporate giant to the smallest startup spectrum. And then I decided to go back to school to get my master's in branding at the School of Visual Arts in New York, because I really wanted to focus on not just the design, but the strategy and the formulation of the brand before the design. So then I was working on a bunch of freelance projects for a few DTC brands and worked at a purpose-driven agency. And then an old coworker at Amazon reached out to me and was like, hey, I have this project. I really think you'd be great for it. Do you want to sync up and collaborate on it? And it happened to be a women's chief executive club. So that was very near and dear to our hearts, which is female empowerment. And so Julie is her name. Julie and I worked on that project, and we launched what is now Chief, which is now worth $1 billion. And has a 60,000 person wait list and is doing incredible things. And so obviously that was such an amazing experience that Julie and I said, hey, let's do this. Let's go into business. We think there's a white space in the market for a really personal agency that gives you like the best of both worlds. So that personal connection that you have with your in-house creative team, And then still giving that outside perspective of the agency. So we sort of launched Ugly Wolf as the antidote to a traditional agency. At regular agencies, you pay top dollar
Nice.
for the biggest exec, and then what actually happens is the most junior designer does your design. So Ugly Wolf is full service from start to finish. Julie and I work on every project, and then we hire sort of subject matter experts to both keep the creative fresh and interesting, unique to the client, but also, sourcing a team that specifically works on your field. So if we're working on a pet brand, it makes sense to have the entire team from developer to photographer who actually has a dog. So you really understand that category and that unique love that you have for your dog. So Ugly Wolf was born. The name came from a bad boss I had in throughout those 15 years who told me I just make things look pretty. So we named it Ugly Wolf to really convey that we don't work in ugly or pretty. It's all about strategic thinking that helps us to build brands and create stories that people care about.
That's awesome. That's a really, really diverse background and a very cool story, of how Ugly Wolf kind of got started. You guys coming together, working on a project, and then and taking it further from there, which is really cool. And I love like the branding in and of itself. I don't know if that's too meta or whatever, but Ugly Wolf brand is really cool. The ugly is just a construct, and I like that. So you guys, brand design, right? Branding agency, is that the primary service that you provide? Are there others, or what's kind of the suite of services that come along with it?
So when we say branding, we mean brand foundation. So really starting with who you are, what you stand for, why are you different, who are you for, which is a really important step that people often skip. They really stick in demographics, and we go way beyond that because, as you know, a millennial can mean 1,000 different things. And so we do those brand foundations. Sometimes we'll be launching a brand, so there'll be naming involved, or brand architecture if there's different product lines, how to organize your brand. Really orienting around a mission and why people should give a shit about you. Excuse my French if that's not
You're good.
allowed on
You're
the
good.
podcast.
Let it fly.
But we keep it real. So we start with brand foundations, and then we go into building the brand guidelines. So again, all around the strategy. So starting with the strategy and making sure that all of the design elements are talking to that strategy. So it's not just a logo and the color blue because, my sister's cousin's friend's favorite color is blue. It's more, okay, the fonts, the palette, the design elements, the logo, everything is telling your story and laddering up to the strategy. So we'll build extensive guidelines, everything from your voice to social media to photography to illustration, if there's illustration, extensive guidelines, and then all the way to execution. So launching it. So that could mean packaging design. It could be environmental design. It could be, anything that you need that's design related, we can do. So really from start to finish, we're your partner all the way through.
That's awesome. Yeah. It seems like a true partnership. You're working with these brands, and branding is such an important part of any business, right? You need to be able to capture the essence of what the brand's doing and who they're trying to reach, and really convey a message and a story through that. And I know it's super important, everyone kind of does, but it's more of like a feeling. You see something and it incites feelings in you and something that you want to latch onto. So maybe we could explore that a little bit. In branding and brand design, why do you think it's so important maybe in the context of e-commerce? We are an e-commerce, vendor, and this is an e-commerce centric podcast, for example.
Yeah.
But maybe in the context of e-commerce, why do you think branding is so crucial for like an online business, and how does it impact the success of that business, and what are some common misconceptions you often encounter when it comes to branding?
Yeah. Well, I'll start with the misconception. So I sort of touched on that, but
Yeah,
The
sure.
biggest misconception that I get with branding is a logo or branding is an aesthetic. And that couldn't be further from the truth. Branding is the intentional differentiation. So everything that you do should be intentionally different. Only you can do it in this way. Only you can do it in this visual sense. So really having a clear point of view. And then having everything tell your story, like I said. So everything is around the strategy. So that is what branding is. And so in the context of e-commerce, it's arguably even more important than traditional retail because you don't have the interaction. You don't have that human experience. You can't pick up the product. You can't smell it. You can't taste it. You can't turn the pack around. You can't try it on. You don't have a person there to be like, hey, how do I use this, or things of that nature. So you really have to rely on the visuals and the words to tell your story, to communicate how it's going to taste, how it's going to smell. So you do that in various things that should be fitting together to tell your story. So it's not just, hey, our tone of voice should be X and that's how we do it. It's the details of the photography. It's the colors. Where are you drawing attention? It's hierarchy, right? And so, especially in the internet age, our attention spans are so fleeting. It's so easy to just click X out of your store. Whereas in traditional retail, you physically got to walk out and you're like, oh, maybe I don't have time to go to the next one, right? It's so easy to ignore you. So really communicating your message, doing it quickly, connecting really quickly, all of that is branding. And it is so important, especially in the e-commerce space.
Yeah, without a doubt. I completely agree, especially because when you think about it, there's so much competition in the e-commerce space, right? There's a lot of brands that can be launched pretty easily. For example, like I could probably log on to Shopify, maybe launch a new product or something like that had come to mind. But you're never going to get anywhere without an intentional differentiation, as you put it, which I think is a really cool way of putting it, like being unique, but also intentional about it and really trying to stand out from the crowd. So photography is a good way to do that. Nuances in how you kind of, convey your message and things like that's really important. I don't know if you have any success stories from Ugly Wolf or anything like that, but maybe you could walk us through, you don't have to name any names or anything like that, but maybe you could walk us through an example of how you started with a brand, changed some things up, and really saw that come to fruition and how they grew.
Yeah. So I was thinking of an e-commerce specific case study that I wanted to share with y'all. So we had love to share their name because we love to promote our partners. So we rebranded a brand called Frankie's on the Park, and they're a 15-year-old brand, fashion for young girls, tweens, and that's a really unique age. You've never been a 12-year-old girl, but it is a tough time. So it's, you're not yet, it's that Britney Spears lyric, right? You're not a girl, but you're not yet a woman. It's that unique age where you're finding out who you are and what you like and how you want to tell your story. And a lot of the competition, you'll see just really ages young girls really quickly. So you're either too childish, where you're a baby, or you're dressing like you're in college. And so Frankie's on the Park was a really unique space. We built a custom team of all women who have all been 12-year-old girls before. And we branded this new brand to really celebrate the girl and empower her. We really created a safe space where she can, express herself and she can figure out who she is as a person, and using fashion to convey how she'd like to be perceived. And they do all these great initiatives as well, mentoring young girls. They do fashion camps where they teach these girls how to, own a brand and market a brand. And they've had some of the girls even launch their products in the store. And so when we got the project, we just wanted to celebrate what they were already doing and enhance it. So when we did the branding for them, we rebranded their e-commerce experience, but also in store. We created design elements that spoke to that strategy, which was heroing the girl. So they were already had these, Frankie's girls that embodied their values. They really celebrated the girl, let them every picture of the clothes was on the girl, because that's how it will be. So really creating a lifestyle around the brand. But then when it came to the e-commerce space, we completely overhauled their website. Hold on, my earbuds falling out. We completely redid their website. We had extremely strict rules on how to photograph the clothes, especially when there wasn't. Our first case scenario was on the girl, but when new stuff came in, they weren't able to shoot it on the girl, or whatnot. We had strict rules around, we need it at this angle, front, back, side. We need to see the details. We want to celebrate the specialness of the garment, etc. And so we relaunched their website, and after launching, we increased their conversion rate by 30%. And
Wow.
now their online business is actually bigger than their really popular retail stores in Chicago and LA. So that's a great example of having branding, tell the story and just enhance what they're already doing and communicate it quickly. But then also don't forget that every single touch point is your brand. So while we definitely did the website, we also wanted to create the same experience in store, even when they leave, in the bag, even up to the tag on the clothing. Everything needed to celebrate the brand's positivity, their empowering nature, and the specialness of the girl. So yeah, it was a great project, and check it out, Frankie's on the Park. If you're a young
Check it
gal.
out, Frankie's on the Park. Just a really cool name too, and a wonderful story. And I love kind of the message and the themes behind it of empowering, young girls to figure themselves out and really get after it. And I think that's one thing, like you put it, I had never experienced. I was never a teenage girl at any point, but just really I can still kind of align with it, right? It's really
Right.
nice to see. You may have mentioned this and I could have missed it, but Frankie's on the Park, the name itself, where did that come from? Just out of
So
curiosity.
actually, it was started by a mother, and she has a young girl named Francesca who goes by Frankie's. And Frankie was a fashionista when she was around 12, and they started the brand to really they found that there was nothing that talked to a girl appropriately to that age, and really didn't have any options for a girl who really wanted to express herself and experiment with fashion. So they started the retail store in Chicago, and then over the course of 15 years, launched their online business, and then another location in Los Angeles. So
Awesome.
that was another cool part. It was, female founded, and now Frankie is their head of marketing. So still, helping the next generation come up behind them, created a safe space for Frankie, and now Frankie's creating a safe space for the girls behind her. So really a cool story, and we definitely communicated that in the branding.
So cool. Very, very cool story indeed. Everyone go check it out. Frankie's on the Park. So kind of going off of that maybe a little bit, I'd like to ask, how might a branding strategy or brand design, differ from like a small niche online store that's just getting started from that of like a larger corporation or a larger e-commerce giant, if at all? Do they differ?
Mm-hmm.
Are there nuances, different approaches you would take if you were to maybe explore, a case study with either of those or something like that?
Definitely. Well, speaking to the smaller niche, because that's more on the scale that we work with and love to, because the founders are much more engaged, really care. They're starting from zero. That's our sort of sweet spot. So I'll speak from the small side. I would say that it's much more personal when you're a smaller niche e-commerce shop. You really care because you need the customer. So every single customer interaction can be personal. And that is something that you don't get with the big box e-commerce stores. You can barely even find a human being when you have a customer service issue. So there's one element that is an advantage. The second is if you're small and niche and you're launching in a market that already has an e-commerce giant, you really know who you are because you have to be capitalizing on the white market, on the white space in the market. So you have to know exactly what you're doing differently and who you're for. And so you're going to talk to that audience in a way that the e-commerce giant just cannot. And the third thing is that it's much faster. You can move more quickly. You can adapt. The coolest part about being online and having a DTC business is that you know everything about your audience. You know where they live, all the demographics, but you also know where they're dropping off. You know what's resonating and what isn't. Mm-hmm. You can test, you can experiment. You can reach out to them and say, hey, you are my first loyalists and we appreciate you so much. Would you take 5 minutes to tell us what you like about the brand? And they're going to say yes. And they're going to probably be even more loyal to you because they think that their opinion matters and you care about them. So you can adapt quickly. You can also build a community around your brand much, much easier because again, people are finding you and thinking that you're different and you're feeling some need for them. So you can test out new products and share it and co-create brands with your audience so that you're really building with them and for them and really creating that community element around a brand. So sometimes e-commerce giants really are watered down. They have no personality. They really, we can't be fun because we have these corporate guidelines. So the smaller brands really have that advantage. And yeah, I think that in this world, like you said, anybody can launch, but I think the smaller guys really can know who they are and do it on purpose. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's such a good point, too. You said there's something to be said about remaining nimble, right? When you're small, you can be nimble and you can be flexible in what you do. And I think that really lends to the benefit of those sellers versus like a big corporation that might want to rebrand. There's so many checks and balances and things that they have to go through in order to make one decision. So it's really fascinating to hear it from that perspective. And for those,
and one more thing I'll say, one more thing that popped into my head is, budgets are smaller. So it definitely makes it feel like a disadvantage. But the positive of that is that you have to be more focused. So you don't have the luxury of a multi-channel commercial campaign, advertising campaign with celebrities, etc. So you really have to know who you are and know who you're for because you can't be everything to everyone. So you really sort of own this like unique space and very much be focused.
Yeah, totally. Being focused, being intentional. That is a huge takeaway for anyone who's listening, launching their brand. And so budgetary constraints, that might be one challenge, right? For a smaller brand that's launching, right? And trying to figure it all out. What are some other common challenges or things along those lines, issues, hurdles that smaller brands encounter when either they're launching their brand or they're trying to figure out their story? What are some other things that you've seen and how have you helped them surmount those?
Yeah, I think the biggest mistake is, so founders, they've obviously done the research. They've found, okay, there's a spot in the market. I think I'll sell it for this price. And they've done sort of the business research. And then they're like, okay, let's launch. And I think a common mistake is not taking the time to think about, who you are as a brand before you go and jump into the deep end. Because they're so quick. They're like, I need the return on investment. We got to get this live every day. We're not live. We're losing money. But I think in the long run, it actually takes longer, it takes more mistakes, it takes more money to then change somebody's first impression of you. And so I think that's a big mistake, is to not build that foundation. Because as I said, branding is not just an aesthetic. It is really a foundation and something that will guide every part of your business. So, it should go all the way to, how you're selling your product, of course, but also how is your customer service talking to your customers, like, should I do this partnership? Should we take this opportunity? Should I hire this person or not? All of those brand values will guide every single decision. And so I think some founders just don't take the time to do that work up front, and then they pay in the long run. I've seen it. We've done, we've met all sorts of founders at all different stages. And we've found like the most successful are the ones that are most open to really doing the work and kind of having a philosophical, exercise, and like, who am I and why do I matter and what really am I selling? Am I selling this product, or what is my promise to my customer? Is it something bigger? Is it some larger mission that we're talking about?
Gotcha. No, that's awesome. And I think that's really a good point, about, for those entrepreneurs, like the biggest thing, right, is like figuring out who you are, and kind of before you're launching, make sure it's something that you're in love with, because to your point, it takes a lot more money and effort to change how somebody thinks versus having a really standout home run first impression. So I think that's really some impactful and meaningful advice for any entrepreneur who's starting to launch their brand, whether that's e-commerce, SaaS, or whatever. So I think that's something that can transcend many other industries and whatnot. So that's awesome, Katie. That's pretty much all I had for you today. It's been an absolute pleasure talking with you and learning about Ugly Wolf and kind of who you guys work with. One final thing that I wanted to ask is, if we have a listener or somebody in the audience who wants to get in touch with Ugly Wolf, maybe they're launching their brand, maybe they want to hear what you guys have to say about it, what's the best way to get in touch with you or the Ugly Wolf team?
Yeah. So email us at hello@theuglywolf.com. Go to our website, theuglywolf.com. Reach out. We always take the call. We really pride ourselves on our human connections. So much so that we've been in business now for 6 years, and we've operated 100% word of mouth. And it is our greatest achievement. That means we're really, connecting with our clients and helping them. And so we always take the call. If we aren't the right fit for you, we try to connect you with someone who is. And we really just, you never know when things come around. So that's how we treat people, and in our life and also in our business. So definitely reach out.
Awesome. There you have it. Thank you again, Katie, so much for joining. And thank you to all of our listeners for tuning in again. And this is Sell Yeah. This is the podcast segment ran by 8fig, where we feature interviews with our valued partners and sellers to spread the good word about what they're doing to bring value to the e-commerce space and make for a better ecosystem for us all. If you'd like to learn more about the sort of partners and providers that 8fig can introduce you to, or simply how 8fig can help you fund your supply chain, please visit 8fig.co or reach out to me, howdy@8fig.co, for more info. Thank you again, Katie. It was an absolute pleasure. I hope to do it again soon in the future. We learn more about the brands, the awesome portfolio that you have, and how you've built it up from this conversation.
Oh, for sure. Thank you so much, Sam. Really appreciate it.
Of course. All right, everyone. Stay tuned. Have a good one.